Hey! Welcome back to the Paradigm Project.
That's the last time you're ever going to hear us say that.
We got new hosts. Welcome to the podcast for not the first time, and definitely not the last time, Mr. Timothy Naylor.
Oh, yeah.
Miss Kelln Pratt.
Hey.
Fantastic. Today, our conversation is going to be about paradigms. What does that word mean? What does it mean to us, and how does it affect our lives?
But first, we're going to get to know Kelln and Tim a little bit. So, what's your first memory?
Okay, I have the weirdest first memory. I just have to say, my earliest memory, I was about 2, okay? And I was sitting at the top of the stairs, and we had, it goes over the ledge for the stairs into the kitchen, right? And so I was calling down, and I was like, Mom, because I wanted her to carry me down the stairs, okay? Because I'm 2 and I'm learning to walk, but apparently I can talk. I don't know. And she was, making a drink, and she couldn't hear me. And so finally, I get mad at her, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna go down the stairs by myself.
And then you fall.
And so I walked down the stairs, and I was like, Mom, why wouldn't you respond to me? And she was like, Kelln, you have to actually ask for something if you want it instead of just calling my name. And I was like, oh, okay. And that's my first childhood memory.
I was 2, and I remember the day when my dad took the training wheels off of my bike.
Tim,
Hello.
let's hear it from you.
Yeah.
When did you take the training wheels off your bike, or do you still have them?
I don't like bikes.
That's awkward.
I don't want to answer that question.
I don't have an earliest memory. I don't know.
Do you
Last thing
remember
I
what
can
happened
remember.
yesterday?
No, wait.
That's awkward.
Oh
about
no,
the
I
day
went on a
before that?
hike yesterday.
I love that.
Oh, okay.
What about the day
He
before that?
remembers.
I was working.
What about the day before that?
I was working.
This just keeps going. What
Yeah.
about the day before that?
I was working.
How long have you been working? Have you been working since you were a child? Yeah, since you were 2.
I've been
Got a
working my
job
whole
at a law
life.
firm.
So at 2 o'clock, 2 a.m. at job.
Said, oh.
Where are you working?
I am a plumbing apprentice for my
Yo.
brother.
Go dang.
What company?
RPM.
Okay. I actually think my cousin works for RPM.
Really? What's his name?
Ethan Richardson.
I don't know anything at the shop.
Put Ethan on
I think my
blast.
neighbor used to work there.
But I've been in a crawl space this whole week, so it's been super fun.
You literally come out of your cave just to do this podcast.
Yep, that's right.
Oh, okay. Here's one. What is a go-to guilty pleasure? I'd like the record to show that Tim is just flexing his pecs right now.
I think for me, every pleasure is a guilty pleasure because I have anxiety. So I just feel bad about doing anything.
Wow. Well, Kelln, that was kind of boring. Let's see if Tim has anything else.
Sorry.
Sorry.
My bad.
Tell us, Tim, a guilty pleasure.
I don't know if it's a guilty pleasure, but when I mow the lawn, I just listen to music and sing super loud, and everyone can hear me, but I don't care.
I love that.
I used to do that, and then my grandma asked me, because I was going for my grandma, she asked me what I was singing. And I don't know, I think I was singing Slipknot or something, because, 14. And I didn't want to tell her, so I just stopped. I was like, okay, cool. Time to
This
sing
is fine.
again.
No, yeah. Mowing the lawn is like my shower moment. Like when you
You
just...
shower while you mow the lawn.
No.
That sounds
Okay.
That's
like-
what
You know
he's
people
saying.
spend forever in the shower, and then they're just think of everything. That's me when I'm mowing the lawn.
Okay.
There you go.
I distinctly remember being probably 11 years old, and when was I 11? A time in my life. I remember trying so hard to freestyle rap.
Nice.
Oh my heck, that's what I did when I was 11.
I was in there for probably 45 minutes, and I
In the
had
shower?
I had my arms going too, and I was rhyming bat with
Cat.
something Matt, hat, bat. I don't even know what I was
Brought your cat
doing.
into the shower.
Looking
Better
back,
cuts when it's wet.
I thought it was so freaking cool. I think I hate it. I think I hate that memory.
Ava,
Feel that?
I have a really important question.
Okay.
Will you freestyle rap right now on the podcast?
Please and thank you.
No. You could not pay me enough money.
Are you sure about
Actually, you could pay me enough money. Okay, I have to think about my reputation. This is my reputation
that?
era.
True. She is a
That's
very
what-
large
You're
rapper.
graduating.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, dang.
I
It's
gonna be very
I cannot reveal my secrets or my process.
Yeah, she's
because
a very hardened.
I'm
white
working on a
woman in the
copyright
rap
for it
game.
right now. Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Okay.
competition.
What's your favorite sleeping position?
on my side.
Okay, I have the weirdest sleep position. Because okay, so I'm small and my bed is also small, but like I can spread out all of the way. So I do. So I'm like this Running Man kind of vibe. No, actually, that's like low key how I sleep. Anyways,
Yeah.
it's pretty great.
My mom said when I sleep I look like a cactus.
Yeah.
Spread the arms out.
Yeah.
I'll go from like spread to like curled into a ball.
Right. There are two options. Like way spread out Running Man or like fetal position on my side.
Timbo,
I do.
What was the question?
favorite sleeping position?
Preferably on a bed with a blanket on my side.
There you go.
Yeah, that's right.
Left pec
You know
flexed, right pec relaxed. Switch to the other side, switch pec.
There you go.
Exactly.
Gotta support.
Gotta get those reps in.
Yeah.
Always. We can get into some deeper questions. What do you have in mind for the podcast?
Yeah, are you guys gonna ruin
Trying
it
to
while
go
we're
first?
Yeah.
I
Like we're gonna come back to this in 30 years.
gone? Was that not the plan?
We'll talk about
We'll
that.
bring you back.
Cool.
I listen to these episodes that you guys have made like a lot of times. At least twice per episode, I think.
Really?
Yeah. And
Gosh, that's more
I
than I
have
have.
really figured out like the pattern and how you guys sort of do it. And I think that I want to explore different ways of how to do that and make it more fun, I guess. And I'm hoping to make things a little more chill, hopefully.
thinks we're
So it
suck.
doesn't sound
That
so
was
much
thinks
like
we're
an
not
interview.
funny.
It's like I listened
Oh
to
my
everything
gosh.
you've ever made twice. It's all garbage.
And you
now
guys
I'm
are
gonna
not
do better.
funny, and you don't know how to have fun, and it's good that you're leaving. Got it. Perfect. Tim's like,
That's awkward.
I'm
Sorry.
not sure I've listened
Please
to an
forgive.
entire episode.
I haven't. I can't stand the sound of my own
That's
voice.
terrible.
I feel that. It's rough.
No, that's good, Tim. You were
It's like
very
nails
right
on
to
a
try to make it
chalkboard
more
on
fun
a
and
screaming
chill.
cat.
Yeah, I mean, I've also listened too many times, dude. But there's a lot of things that I really, really love about what you've done with the podcast. I love a lot of the deep thinking that you go through. I love a lot of the topics that you discuss. I think that that's fantastic. But I also, I definitely want it to be this kind of really chill environment where we can just have a growth mindset and learn new things. And have a blast with it, dude. I mean, not that you didn't have a blast because you totally did. It was fantastic. But I love like the laid back, deep conversations. And those are the portions of what you did that I really want to bring out and emphasize as we move on.
I do like more of those for me personally. When we can have like more of a chill episode. For me at least, and Ava, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. But like when we were doing like the Mike Winder episode, I remember feeling like really stressed about like being professional and like a formal like journalistic interview.
Okay.
I was like, I am the New York Times. Like this is gonna, all 6 of you, our listeners, are going to hear this, and it needs to be good. And
We have 36, by the way. So
do we actually?
no, not consistently.
Okay. 36 total plays. It's all Tim and Kelln. I was gonna say,
And
I was
my
like,
mom.
there are
My mom
probably
has watched
more
more than
people
one
in
episode.
My mom
Yeah.
loves them.
Yeah,
So.
my mom has watched.
583.
Are you
Dang.
kidding?
Oh, wow.
Dang.
Estimated audience of 19 consistently.
Whoa!
Heck
That's
yeah.
crazy.
3 of which, or at least 2 of which are us, and then one of them
One
is
my
my
mom.
parents. So
Yeah.
But to all of our parents out there. But yeah, I like the chill ones. I felt like the STEM one was pretty good.
Yeah.
But I wanted to open up to you, but more to you, Ava. You can't see where I'm pointing, audio listeners. And also to Tim and Kelln. More specifically, what is your favorite episode of the podcast that you were not on?
Oh man.
that's rough.
Well, I was on all of them.
Well, yeah, that's for them.
So-
for you, it's just what was your
So,
favorite episode?
the April Fool's episode.
Oh gosh. Burn it.
One of
No.
the 2 episodes without me.
Burn it with fire. There's 3. So
So funny.
okay. There are a few I love so much, but I remember the Cox and Artisan one. I just sat there and I didn't even know what to say because my mind was expanding like so much. I learned so much, and that's what this whole thing was about, was, you know, to learn and to grow. And I love just sitting there, and I actually felt like that was a discussion that I have gotten into, and I haven't gotten into discussions in so long, and I loved it, and I just loved feeling like I like just learning. And it's difficult because I'll try to take the things that I learned from that episode out into other conversations, but I literally just can't vocalize like what they taught me. And same with the Crowley episode that you guys have just barely heard now. That one, it was just the same thing. I was learning so much, and I was just so interested in it that I was just completely engaged. And it's so hard to completely engage in everything now because of, like social media, and like my attention span is just like shortened down to like a minute. And I was just able to get into it and really learn. And that's what I felt like this podcast was supposed to be about for me. And that's what I enjoyed about it.
I was going to say, I like that one.
For sure. I think that's definitely actually one of my favorites, is because it went so deep and it was so real, but it was...
Which one?
The Cox and Arneson. My bad. No, but the Cox and Arneson episode was definitely one of my favorites because it was so deep, it was so real, it was so applicable, but it was also, I felt like you could understand some of the topics. And it was because there was so much to learn from it. But you could just tell listening to it that everybody in it was just there. They were learning, they were growing, they were looking at all of these options, looking at all of these sides of the situation, and really having a deep discussion, and a discussion that you can take and implement instead of just a discussion about, Chick-fil-A sauce or something. I don't know. But
it's crazy that you said that, because the first episode that never saw the light of day, we literally talked about chicken wing sauce, Buffalo Wild Wing sauce.
Oh my heck.
That's
for
awesome.
30 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
That and Scooby-Doo, but like,
I love that.
anyway.
Well, I was going to say, I think everyone who was on that episode was just a really excellent podcast host or
Yes.
podcast guest, and it was just really all-star team on that one. The joke is that I was not on that episode. Sorry about that. Probably not sorry. It's probably better.
Probably.
I would have just been like
kidding.
upset and mad in the corner and being like, "You're wrong," and it was like, "I love you," to Arneson and Cox. But I don't know. Like, Tim, what was your favorite?
I don't know. I think it's kind of tied between the Camp Mariah and the most recent one, because I feel like kind of the same way that Kelln was saying, like they talk about deep stuff, but in a way that I can totally understand. And I do like the Cox and Arneson one and everything, but like I'm too small brain for that. But I do feel like
We'll work on that.
It's good you're hosting.
I feel like I learn a lot from just like the most recent one, especially because I sat in on
The
it.
Crowley episode.
Yeah. And I don't know. I just really liked it. So
Right.
Solid.
Going back to what I was saying about like the podcast for me being about like learning and like learning from other people. I had this thought while preparing for this episode about Plato's Cave. If you're all familiar with Plato's Cave, I'll just explain a little bit. So basically, it's all about ignorance and stuff. And so there are people that are sitting on chairs and they are pointing forward at a wall. And behind them is like a fire pit, correct? Or like just like flames, and then there's a bridge and there's people walking across the bridge. The thing is the people at the chair, they don't turn to look behind them. They don't know what's going on. So the only thing they perceive is the shadows being cast on the wall. And so they watch those almost religiously, right? Many things could happen from that. They could form like some sort of religion, some sort of, I don't know, process of thinking. But what's interesting is if even one person would turn their head, immediately their entire perception would change. They'd realize, okay, these shadows that we're seeing are not what I thought. They are actually like being casted by somebody. And then that could lead to, them moving their arms, moving their legs, maybe even standing up and like exploring. And then, they go through the cave and they eventually find their way out and they find the sun and whatever. It's been a long time since I've read it. All right, Kelln, that was kind of rough. So help me out. I know it's not completely correct. So
Yeah, so I have the text here, and it basically talks about how they were chained there, and so they had like their legs were chained and their necks were chained, and they couldn't actually turn their heads even.
Okay.
So if you look at and later in the text it talks about how one of them did come into the light, and so if they were to come into the light, you see that paradigm shift, right? But it's interesting to see that they weren't actually allowed to, and they were prisoners there staring at the wall their whole life. and that's all that they knew, you know? And so to see that later, somewhere in the middle, one of the people that's in charge of them comes and takes them, right? And they take this one person out into the light. And at first he's like, oh my goodness, no, what is this? And he's really confused. He doesn't think it's reality. He's like, no, this is fake. This is blurry. What's real? The shadows that I saw. That's right. But eventually his eyes start to adjust. He starts to have that shift in his mind, that shift of the understanding. I think it's when they take him over to a river, I believe. And he sees the reflection of the river. And so by this time, he's gotten used to kind of seeing things, and his eyes have gotten used to the light, right? But he goes to this river, and he sees some birds, and he sees his own reflection. And that's where he's like, oh, I was seeing this image of reality instead of seeing actual reality. And later on, he goes in, and he tries to get his friends out of the cave, the people that he was with, I'm not sure if the people tell him that he has to, or if he just goes in there because he's like, oh my goodness, I've been enlightened. But because all they've known is because all they've known is the shadows and is that background, whatever, in that dark cave, they don't want to come out. They're like, no, that's crazy. Light, who's she? I said, I could never. No, but they're really confused because they haven't had that paradigm shift yet. So eventually he's able to convince them to come out, and then they're able to have that mindset change as well. But it takes a really long time for them to get adjusted to the light because that's all they've known is the dark and the shadows.
Yeah. And I was just thinking while you're talking about, how their perceptions and paradigms were shifting. It's almost in a sense harder now to do that because there is literally quite physically a night and day difference for them.
Right.
Well, I mean, it feels like we've definitely built our own Plato's cave, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, the point of
Really?
Plato's cave is that you've, put yourself in something from birth, right?
Right.
Look at a modern, small one, like a infant, right?
Small.
Immediately
A
handed...
baby.
A little baby.
A little baby.
Baby.
You're immediately going to give your kid a tablet. You're immediately going to put them in front of baby stim videos. And they are never going to latch off of a screen for the rest of their life, right? With the way that social media is set up as an echo chamber to specifically curate people who think like you, we've made our own Plato's cave.
Amen to
in a
that.
very literal way.
Kind of like what you're saying with that. I had a discussion recently with someone talking about a religion mindset and how a lot of people, if they grow up in a certain religion or in a certain family with various views, if they grow up in that culture and that society, then they're very used to that. One of my friends recently took a world culture class and a world religions class. And in that class, they discussed a lot of different ideas about a lot of different types of religion, right? But for some of the students in that class, they noticed that it was hard for them to even comprehend the idea of a few various religions because it was so different from what they had grown up on. Because if you grow up in a specific church, you're taught these things from birth. It's in your family life. A lot of times it's in work or school as well. And you're so used to this, so your paradigm is set, right? And so as soon as other things are introduced, other ideas are introduced, you have to have that paradigm shift to be able to see another perspective, and not necessarily, you don't have to accept it per se. You can keep your own religious beliefs and also understand other ones. But a lot of the time, if people aren't open to having a growth mindset, having a paradigm shift, then it's hard to comprehend things, even in a scholarly setting.
I completely agree. I would say that social media and our cultural and religious dogma is absolutely a Plato's cave. I mean, you set people up from birth, you mold them into the echo chamber that you want from your children. You get extremely upset if they disagree with you, and then they hopefully, according to your plan as the parent, go out and become small you who believes everything you believe and creates a lineage of people who believe like you, and then a few generations later we have two major beliefs, and then they hate each other, and it's like, oh no.
It's such a huge issue because I don't know, even you look at, philosophers for all of, history, and they've still met that same kind of, uprising or the hate that a lot of people get now for, having a different, freaking Socrates murdered, but then later, was like, we love Socrates. He had ideas. Oh yeah, you shouldn't have killed him then. But like, we've seen this always, but it's especially bad now because yes, we have those, like you were saying, echo chambers, and so the conversation has been shut off. Mm-hmm. It's like you turn the tap off. There's no flow, and it's super dangerous. I've noticed people, they can't handle anything. I remember, I don't know, I got into like a little thing with somebody I know. Like, it was super confusing because it came out of nowhere. We were talking about a movie, and I shared my opinion on a movie. And I was talking about, I'm like, yeah, this thing happened to these people, and it was sad, but I don't think they should have gone and tried to like kill the entire world as, a reaction. And they got so mad, and they wouldn't even talk to me. And it was really, I didn't know what I had done because I was sharing an opinion. And I'm like, if you're mad at me, like, tell me why. Tell me your thoughts. And it put a strain on our relationship, and it became incredibly awkward. And I see the issue with that because I feel like if we continue to let this happen, which we are letting it happen, we are being complicit with it, and no action is an action. I can just see it getting worse and worse and worse at the point, where we regress, and it has happened. We do kill people for what they believe, and I don't know. That's my concern.
I would say it stems from, because like when you're thinking about paradigm, you're thinking about the biggest picture, right? Of like the lens you see everything through has to be the biggest lens. And I think it would come from stranger danger, don't talk to strangers. Like that, I would say is very key, right? If you look at
the warning you give to children, or like the idea of it.
The idea, but also ingraining that into kids. That like, yeah, let's keep our kids safe. There are people who would take advantage of you and hurt you.
Snatch them.
Yeah.
Got him. Sorry.
Don't snatch.
Don't snatch.
But like, when we ingrain that like everyone who's not in our close family is stranger and we shut them out, it's like, if you look at like turn of the century America with coffee houses, it was like, okay, I'm meeting there with people I don't know to get coffee and just talk. Like we're just having discussions. Or in the great English coffee houses, there was like scientists performing like dissections and like performing experiments, like in the coffee house, talking to people, hanging out, having this like cultural moment. Now, if you look at a subway, everyone's on their phone. No one talks to each other. And even before phones, like I'm not gonna say like smartphones killed. Back in my day, we used to talk to people. Now kids just look at their phone. But even back then, it was like you're just going to be zoned in on whatever you're doing. You're blocking out the world. You're not willing to hear other people because other people are strangers.
Oh my gosh, that reminded me. When we were in New York, so Choir took a tour to New York like 2 years ago now. Do you remember, Tim, when we were one year? Wow. We were on the bus, and Noah tried to talk to this man next to him in the bus, and the guy turned to him, and he goes, and he yells at him, and he goes, I don't know how you do it where you're from, but here in New York, we mind our freaking business, and blah, 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 blah. And he yelled at him for just saying hello. Like, how are you?
I will give you
I
a
feel
New
like
York dollar
Noah
to say that
got
you did
a
not
lot
say
of crap
friggin'.
on that trip.
He
Just
did get a
like,
lot of crap.
well, yeah.
But I think it comes from tribalism, right? Because we as humans are very tribalist people. Of like, there's an us and there's a them. And anyone who's not us is them. And the way that we see tribalism, like even if you take like, say you're going to like Comic-Con and you're asking a celebrity questions. Those questions are very often going to be things like, do you like the same music that I do? How can I relate to you? Like what tribe are you a part of that I'm also a part of so that you no longer have to be a stranger? And like, I want you to be in my tribe of people who think like me and act like me. And like, we literally create spaces for tribalism to flourish. And so instead of being like, a tribe of even the US or even like North America or whatever, like our tribes are so small and so exclusive that we can't like get along with people anymore.
The way I kind of like to see it is like everybody's wearing different color tinted glasses and they need to just take them off completely. Just any of you guys ever had like that moment of that paradigm shift where you came out?
I'm gonna stop to think for a second. Well, I was gonna say that like
That sounded wrong at the end. I'm sorry.
Do you want to rephrase
when
it?
you came out of the cave.
Where you came out of the cave.
I think that, I mean, I haven't necessarily had
He's
like,
still in the cave.
I mean,
still
I've
in
had
the
a
cave.
couple epiphany kind of like coming into the light and such like that. But I think a lot of the times it's like how it was for the first guy who came out from the cave, he took time. You know, he took time to adjust to the light. His eyes took that. Like, I mean, you've all entered a room or exited a room and it was dark and your eyes are like, what is going on? You know, it took time for him to adjust. And I think I've definitely had experiences in my life or things or an idea that at first I was like, oh, no. Like, that cannot be. Never. But as I learned more, as I experienced more, I got a little bit more comfortable with the idea and I was able to accept it more. And that's actually something really interesting in Plato's cave is because he goes through the story and then afterwards he's talking to the other guy and he's like, well, when the first man came in to get the other guys, they didn't want to come out, right? They were like, oh my goodness, no, that sounds scary because that's all they knew. And so he has to be patient with them. He has to take the time to convince them. And then once they come out into the light, that once they're finally like, yes, I will listen to you, you know, it takes them even longer than that to get adjusted. And he says in here, and I don't have the exact quote, but he says, hey, y'all have to be patient with them because sometimes it takes time to get adjusted to new ideas. And I think that's very important to remember, especially in society today, that it is important to be assertive. It's important to invite people to good ideas and good beliefs. It's important to educate people, but it's also important to respect the fact that it takes time to change those ideas and to come into, quote unquote, the light.
I was going to say something similar. I don't know if I've obviously had, like Kelln said, epiphany moments, but comparing it to the analogy, it's never just a moment. It is always a process. Mm-hmm. Like I know for me personally, everybody follows an ideology. Let's just get that out there.
Amen.
Whether it be religion, whether it be not religion, everybody has some sort of ideology that they follow. And for me, it was my religion, or I guess my ideology. And I, was raised in it. And then there was a moment, probably like 2 years, where I was like, I don't know if I believe this. And it was the same thing. I had to be patient with myself. I had to be patient with both sides of the spectrum, stay or go kind of situation. But I did my due diligence and, I took the time, like in the analogy, it's a struggle, but you go through it and finally you come out to the sun and you come out to the light and then you have your moment of like, okay. And I wouldn't even explain it as a epiphany, woo, I got it. It's more of just like you settle into it. Like someone asks you a question, you're just like, yeah, I can answer that. Or yeah, I believe that.
I feel like those epiphany moments are like years after, or like a lot of time after the epiphany has actually taken place, that then you realize it, that you're like, oh my gosh, I just realized I've been in a different paradigm.
Yeah.
Because it's not all at once, but like after the change has happened and then you're living with that change, one day you wake up and you're like, I've changed. When did that happen? It's like, well, it took all this time. You just didn't notice it.
Yeah. I don't know, and I think there are very like real world examples of like paradigm changes super quickly that can happen. Like, I don't know, we have Mr. DeBono here. He's the only parent we have in this room, but I imagine the minute your baby is born, everything changes. And I've heard that from every single person I've asked, who has a kid. Daniel, how would you know? He's shaking his head.
I was gonna say, I was like, it's been a wild summer for a lot.
9 months went by in like 3 months. No, everything changes. Your life changes. Your mindset changes. Hopefully, that's the thing. But it happens like en masse to everybody who has kids. Mm-hmm. And there are just some things like that, and there are some things that are not. I don't know.
Right.
So we're not a complete lost cause. We know parents have that shift. We know people have those shifts. But we also live in paradigms because like we have to choose somewhere to be, I guess. So do you guys have any paradigms that you are aware of?
So when I first came to Paradigm, the school, then I don't know. It was my first year of actual school, 9th grade. So I was homeschooled all the way up until then. But I've always grown up with just a small group of friends. A lot of them were my cousins, and so it's really weird to go from hanging out with only people that think and talk like you, sort of, and then just you're going to this building and there's just so many weirdos and you're like, what the frick? And it took me a while to get used to it, but I've really grown to like it. And like you were saying, it takes time, but I've gotten used to it and I really like it here. So
That's beautiful.
I would say that I have a political paradigm, not just like a political belief system. It's a paradigm because I have these ideas, I have this main concept that like, truth exists and I know the truth kind of, or like I have a better idea, or like I have these, beliefs that I have, and I view everything through that. Mm-hmm. So I could look at a situation and I would be like, that was the wrong way to handle it, or this is how it should have been handled, or this should be the outcome. And I know I do this because I choose to do this, just because of, I don't even think it's just because of the way I am. It's just because of the way I choose to believe, what I think is right. And obviously I'm open for discussion and open for change, but majority of my beliefs are solid. And I don't know, that's one I know I have because I view everything through that.
Right. And I think I definitely see a little bit in my life, not necessarily more on the political scale, but definitely on like morals and what I think is right, I think is wrong, how I think people should act. Genuinely coming to this school has really impacted the way that I think people should act. I'd like to bring up, this was something we talked a little bit about in preparing for this episode, but the Paradigm Declaration, and even just the first line is saying, I am a paradigm patriot. If we look over at the definition of patriot, it says a person who vigorously supports their country and is prepared to defend it against enemies or detractors. So if we look at it in that sense, I defend my paradigm. And partially you could say, oh yes, my school. But also I defend my mindset. I defend my ideas. I defend my beliefs. And I take care of them. And I let them learn and I let them grow. And as the Paradigm Declaration goes even further, it talks about what we here at Paradigm, the school, think should be that quote unquote paradigm, that mentality that you should have, especially when interacting with other people's, it works. I am a free soul with the capacity to learn and grow. We like to have a growth mindset, we scholar and a servant leader. I come here to be educated and to learn, things like I live in gratitude. That's a lifestyle choice that I make as a person because I came to this school and because I was influenced and that I decided that's something that's important to me, and that's a paradigm that I defend, And I think that's definitely something that has been a big paradigm shift in my life because me, like Tim, I was homeschooled. I was a weirdo child. But I came to Paradigm and I was able to find my beliefs. I was able to find my mindset and my paradigm shifted.
I think that's so interesting. But like you were saying, you defend your ideas and your paradigms. I think it's important to note because we also talked about like you have to have a room to have paradigm shifts.
Right.
A thought just came to me. It's like if you find yourself struggling to defend something, then maybe it's time for a shift.
Ooh.
And I don't know if it was due to circumstance or things that happened in my life, but I had a very negative and toxic experience with growing up in religion. And so because of that, my paradigm shifted to trying to always be aware of whatever lens I'm looking at things through, and trying to like, if I listen to a right-wing source on a story, I should also try and listen to a left-wing source, or I should try, and I always gravitate to philosophers who either bring up something I've never heard, like a completely new lens, or seem to be without lenses. Because when I was young and I had a very, very rigid lens and then tried to question things, the lens got much smaller and much tighter, and it just was suffocating under the weight of a dogma and a paradigm. And so when I hear someone say like, oh, I'm going to defend my paradigms, like that to me is very strange, except for that I will defend my paradigm because my paradigm is trying to see things from as many angles as possible. There's a Marcus Aurelius quote that I'll paraphrase because I'd butcher it if I quoted it, but he's like, I always, if a man tells me that I'm wrong on something and that I don't have the truth, and he shares with me the real truth where I was incorrect before, I will always take that new truth because the truth never hurt anyone, and that is like something I try and live by. As far as like, I don't want to defend my ideas. I want to like hear new ones and have my ideas get wrecked.
I feel like it's more of not defending a paradigm, it's defending aspects like that that come from it, I guess, because I think, you know, there's two sides to every stone. You can have a negative experience through living through a paradigm, but you can have had a good moment from it, or a good thing you learned from it, or you know what I mean. And so it's so important to, you know, like we've been talking about, keep your mind open and keep the discussion open, but then also you don't have to let everything go at once, you know, because you obviously have this idea like, I'm going to constantly try to balance it out and see what I believe, but even then you're keeping you're stocking ideas that you like better. Like you'll take one from one side or from the other.
Like if we view paradigms as a tinted lens, I want my paradigm to be a mosaic of my favorite parts of everything that I, you know, because due to my negative experience, it doesn't have to be anyone else's negative experience. While there was really bad things that came from that, there was really good things in that I have very strong belief in the freedom of speech. I have very strong belief in individual responsibility and individual liberty. And I believe that people should act on themselves and be free to make choices and reap both the awesome benefits for that and the awful benefits of those choices, because I think that's important. And so like growing up in something constrictive has allowed me to become more open, which is kind of weird. But
I really like that because it demonstrates the power of just how powerful a paradigm shift can be. So there was this guy in 1954, his name was Roger Bannister, and at the time there was a bunch of scientists and they were saying like, you cannot run a mile faster than 4 minutes. It's impossible. And that was the paradigm of everyone, you know. And he just decided, no, that wasn't his paradigm, and he beat it. And it's really interesting because like society progresses that way, I guess. Because not even a week later, somebody beat his record.
that is so cool.
And it just keeps going. And
there's a video essay style documentary by Emperor Lemon called the History of the World's Highest Jump. That literally goes back to the earliest jump, which is like someone in China, there's a barn that's on fire and they have to jump out the top window of the barn or something like that. And then like all the way up to the Red Bull space jump where he's like actually like in the atmosphere hanging from a balloon and like jumps. Like how our paradigms have shifted because of that, and how we were like, you just can't. Like you that blue sky stuff up there, you can't go into that. You'll die. Like, and then some guy was like, what if I like built a real big balloon and like went up there, and then he like passed out because there was no oxygen, because there's no oxygen up there, we didn't know that. Luckily the balloon drifted down, but like two of his friends died in the balloon with him, and he was like, well, that was wild, let me try that again but with oxygen this time.
Oh my gosh.
And it's like stuff like that where it's like, if he hadn't thought, well is that it? Like, is that the cap? Like, we just can't? Like, he was like, no, of course we should. We should be able to do that. So let's do that. And then, like, pushed it and advanced it through trial and error and, like, sometimes bloody suffering. And it's terrible, but it's
also like
beautiful.
there's a balance between that, because if you read Frankenstein, like that entire book is about, well, not about, a lesson I learned from the book is like science will go too far. Science will push the limits to where they should not be pushed. And
That is not the moral I got from Frankenstein.
well, if you think about it, it could be. Like, he creates this horrific monster for the sake of creating life, which we already have the power to do, genius. Anyway.
Yeah, but he wanted to do it without a uterus, though.
He just couldn't
if you
get
look
it.
at that, then that's saying, oh, well, we can go that far, but you have to do it in the right way. Because if you go up that high without oxygen, you will die. If you create life the wrong way, then you will die, and there will be problems and there will be consequences for what you do. So it's possible to go that far. It's possible to go as far as you want. There's not necessarily a cap, but there's a cap for doing it in certain ways. There's a
But
rule.
We just need to find a way to take into consideration human life.
I would wager that your view of Frankenstein is evidence of your paradigms about politics, in that, like, you're assigning a moral to creating life without human intercourse, right? So, like, Frankenstein
Whoa.
was like, yo,
No.
what if I try and create life? And then it turned into a monster. But did he or did he not make a living being, though? Right?
Okay,
Like, think
but
about how
in the
much
process,
advancement
he
we could
murdered
have
his
from that.
entire family.
Sure. And during the process of the world's highest jump, people died. There was a guy in southern Utah, and he was like, you know what? I used to be an Air Force pilot. I'm not anymore. Let's see how many G's the human body can withstand before I die. All right, let's do this, guys. And so he, like, seriously insane. He would do, like, stop tests and also acceleration tests. So he just, like, put himself on, like, a rocket sled and was like, all right, let's go real fast and stop real fast. And, like, there's, like, videos of him, and he's, like, completely concussed because he just did, like, 400 G's and his eyes are bleeding. And he was like, we learned so much. And it's like, yeah, he kind of had to do that because now we know, like, how many G's a human can withstand, right? But, like, was it immoral for him to hurt himself trying to do that? It seems like that's what you're looking at, is the morality of the situation and the cost, but you're not looking at the benefits.
Okay, but do the benefits outweigh the fact that Dr. Frankenstein created a being that murdered his child brother, murdered his bride, murdered his father, could murder the entire earth? Is science more important than that?
Unequivocally.
Dear Lord.
Absolutely. Sure. Okay.
And
let's
here's where we
take a step back,
find
take a step back.
two different paradigms. Wow.
There was a guy back in the day, and he put sugar and flavoring in water and then carbonated it. And he made soda. Amazing. How many people has soda killed? Like, a lot. Like, a lot.
Okay, but through
But
their
we
own
still
choice to
did it.
consume the amount.
But we still made it, but you're blaming the invention, right?
The
So
invention of a
maybe
superhuman?
Frankenstein could have been different if he was raised differently, educated differently, trained differently, right? But you're just like, because life was created, automatically that life must be a monster because it was created out of my realm of acceptability.
That's not what I'm saying.
I would like to interject, if I may. First of all, I don't think that these are comparable aspects of paradigms. I think that they're, like, although you can potentially discuss soda versus, like, murder monster, I don't think it's applicable in this situation specifically. But what I would like to say that I think is really interesting is it's quite fascinating to me to look at both of your paradigms and how solid you are on defending them. And we can take and learn from this discussion that we've just had, is that you're both very much in the cave right now. And not that it's a bad thing to defend your paradigm, because you should be defending beliefs, especially moral beliefs. You shouldn't let a discussion about soda make you think that it's okay to kill people.
Soda!
Yeah.
That's what I think I would buy and going,
But I do think
"Soda."
it's interesting to
Okay,
see
that's all.
how defensive you get about the idea of soda and how it should affect people and how morally that is okay or not okay. So I have a question for either of you, looking this from preferably a shifted paradigm, an outside paradigm of the discussion, being in the discussion, or even Tim from watching this outside. I would love to dissect where your paradigms are right now and how you think you could shift them, to look at a few other ideas.
Experiencing a game like BioShock, where it is talking about the idea of a sample of science going too far. That's the theme of the game. It's an underwater city where there was no rule of law, and scientists flocked there to like do their weird experiments. And then you have like mutants and robots and like people where you're like, what if I put a knife but in a person's arm? What happens to them, guy? Or like you're like, oh, we made chemicals that like make you shoot lasers now. Cool, but also might give you arm cancer. Where science was allowed to flourish, but instead of learning from that technology, we locked it away, we demonized it in the game, and we're like, no, it's not allowed. The reason I bring up soda is because it feels like it amplifies the personal responsibility aspect without using firearms as an example. Because in my opinion, firearms and soda are comparable in this aspect. Both will kill you if used improperly.
Right. And what I'm coming from is, my point isn't, there's only one way to create life. That's not even relevant. It's about science going too far. Or science without bounds. It will go too far. And I say this because we have examples. We have, we think about, the Victorian era, and that's when like science about the human body is really developing, because they still believe them in like in the four fluids that kept people alive: blood, bile, something, And so they would take bodies and they would, dissect them in front of everybody. And yeah, it had good things. But what came from that also is that there was body snatchers, and they were leaving body remains everywhere, and they were making a joke out of it and all that. And it became incredibly desensitized. And plus they were doing it without, but that is not the best example. Another example, Chernobyl. Should we talk about Chernobyl? Because they were handling this equipment improperly. This radioactive something, I can't tell you because I am so bad at science, explodes. We have a giant nuclear plant that is just leaking radiation everywhere, and hundreds of people died. First responders died, scientists died. It's still leaking radiation. It still can't be cleaned up. The fire's still like going, and they've got like goop that they can't clean up because you can't be inside of it for more than like a minute without getting a lethal amount of stuff. And so if they had followed proper protocol or proper bounds, maybe we would have progressed a little slower, but those people wouldn't have died and we wouldn't have this issue. And so what I'm trying to say is that is why I believe that science should, it should have bounds on it, because ethically human life, I feel like, is valuable.
In the context of the way that you're speaking, human life is invaluable, right? And I think that a lot of people have that paradigm. I'm curious your opinion on, because the people that did that, was that necessarily, I mean, I wasn't there, so I don't know. Was that on purpose? Was that because their paradigm was in the wrong place and they believed this was more
to use cheaper and weaker supplies, because it was this, it was the Soviet Union, and so they were trying to progress faster than the US. And so they skipped some protocols. They used, I could be wrong about this. My dad is so versed in Chernobyl, it's insane. But they chose to use cheaper materials and weaker materials because their goal was not to contain and to learn. It was to progress faster.
Okay. So you're saying that their paradigm was progress rather than quality, correct?
From my knowledge,
okay.
Yes.
So I think where I take issue is your definition of science then. Because I would define science as a method, right? It's not a group of people or a body of work or experiments that have been conducted or a guy in a laptop with a tube that like does spirals and a Bunsen burner. That's not science. Science is ask a question, do some research, make a guess, test question, have answers.
Well,
Scientific
that
method,
is a
right?
scientific method, yes.
That is science. That is all science.
That is a scientific method. That is not science.
That is science.
Ava,
That is
what's your
a
definition
method
of
to
science?
Yeah. How would you define science?
Science, okay. There's a difference between like science, obviously, because we live in science. We live in the balance of everything in like nature, but then there's like the practice of science, and that is to discover. And
so there's like an experience and like a research aspect?
Yeah, well, yes. So in a way, it is also a method, but I don't know. I have no idea. It's so complicated.
Okay. Simplify. Let's take my definition just for a moment. Walk with me here. Science is a method.
Can we look at Tim's definition?
Tim Tam, what's your definition of science?
Tim Tam.
Aren't Tim
Of
Tams, aren't
science.
they like...
That's not what we're talking
Go
about.
for it.
So these are two really great, very strong paradigms that have a lot of value and both have a lot of truth to them. So I'm curious, when would it be a time to maybe shift your paradigm? And when would it be appropriate for that? Or in what context? And how would you do that? How would you shift your paradigm? How would you go about that?
I think that it's really important to keep your eyes open and make sure that you are trying to take into account of everyone's feelings and everything before you change your mind, I guess. I think that there are situations where it might be important to change your paradigm. But it's really important to remember that you can take a wrong turn when it comes to paradigm. Like, this is going to sound super nerdy, but like Darth Vader, he went through a paradigm shift when he was Anakin, became Darth Vader, and then once more before he died. But I think he took under the influence of other people too much and became too emotionally attached. Like, that's literally what happens. Yeah. And I think it's very important to remember that you must change before you can expect others to. Like, always look within yourself, and that's not a selfish thing to say. You need to find out for yourself what is the best that you can be.
And I guess, I mean, I don't feel right now that I have to change on the way I view, progression versus like human life now. I don't know. But, as I get older, maybe I will. I feel like if it needs to happen, it hopefully will happen. Obviously, I need to take steps to do that. Like, I need to continue to learn. I need to continue to read and listen. And it wasn't just like not listening to Dallin there. I was definitely listening, and there's definitely things to think about, because I do agree that science does need to continue for our safety. But also, it's just like, at what cost? And how do we effectively value both? And so it's taking something from every conversation and applying it.
What I felt like our discussion boiled down to was that, and I was trying to hear you, and I was trying to listen to what you were saying, because I do think there are valid points about how Frankenstein's actions affected other people's lives. Did he take that into consideration? Is he the monster? Allegory of the book. But
by the way, I don't think he is, but I think he made a very, very poor decision.
Fair. But I was more trying to get at that I don't believe there's inappropriate questions. And I believe when people start saying there's inappropriate questions, oh, you can't ask that, or that's too far. You can't be curious about that. That creates control, and it creates dogma, and it creates authoritarianism.
Exactly. So you can have the questions. It's just on how you execute them that needs to be, I don't know about confined, but controlled.
Yeah. And I completely agree. And I think it is up to you to ask questions, but to also temper those questions to not kill your entire family in the world.
Yeah, hopefully.
But on my paradigm, I would shift in, you could make an argument from morality, right? That would say that, like, the argument is safety or liberty. Can you ask the question? Can you test the hypothesis? Can you do the research? Or should you play it safe? And I think there's an argument to be made for safety in both questions. Obviously, this begs the
I don't know why they need to be separate, though. I think that's where we're getting disconnected.
Benjamin Franklin, those who would trade safety for liberty shall have neither.
I don't know about that, but
Something
sure.
like that.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you.
But to answer Kellen's question about how and when you should shift your paradigm. On Sunday, it will be 9 months with my boyfriend Alistair, and I'm very excited about that. But it has changed a lot of things about the way I view the world, being in a relationship. Specifically, it's changed the way that I think about marriage, which I know we've talked on this podcast before, or outside of this podcast at length about marriage. And there's a shift of the way that I used to view it, of a way that the law traps people into paying alimony or screws over people, and it's just a federalized system to make a little bit more money for the government.
Except they give you money if you get married. Anyway.
Tax breaks, yeah.
I'm like, I should get married so I can get money.
And so I always was like, nope, I hate that. I hate that there's tax breaks. I hate that there's
Right.
all this. I don't like it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be a part of the system. But now I find myself falling more into the paradigm of, well, like, boyfriend isn't a very strong word, so might have to make it husband. And so it's changed the way that I think about that. I still don't like the institutionalization of marriage, but I now see why people go along with it, and I see why they get married anyway. And, like, I see why people have their paradigms. And I think that's what getting older and maturity is, and to be an examiner, to be a free thinker, to be, a free soul in the great conversation of ideas?
A free soul with the capacity to learn and grow.
Yeah, that one. To be a free soul with the capacity to learn and grow, you must try and empathize and understand why people believe the things that they believe. And so to do that takes a lot of in-depth research into that person sometimes to see where they're coming from, which is why I love to study the great villains of history or of fiction. Darth Vader, fantastic example.
Oh, yeah.
Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men, another amazing example. Anton Chigurh plays a psychopath that has been scientifically studied as the most realistic psychopath portrayed in fiction. He doesn't view his actions as his own. He views himself as a force of nature. He's like, I have to kill you. I don't really have a choice in this. And he doesn't explain his motives or why he does the things he does in the way that he does. But when you look at that and you say, I wonder if I knew what he knew, if I examined the world through his lens, would I think the same? And you try and understand where those villains are coming from for horrendous, awful things. It's very interesting to me how someone like that gets created. And so I like to study that because
Well, it's also
gives you
important
these
to
new
know
paradigms.
because,
Yeah.
like, how do I not screw up my kids?
Yeah, exactly.
I find that interesting because it kind of it makes me think of you're looking at other people's paradigms and you're kind of shifting your own paradigm, but you're not necessarily taking on a new paradigm. You're looking at all of the options, and I think that actually goes back a little bit to what I was asking earlier. Is it's important to shift your paradigms and everything, but as to when and how, I think before you actually thoroughly shift your paradigm, it's important to understand others, and it's important to look at other options. It's important to look at the other side, but you don't necessarily have to switch to that side. It's kind of like a picking your own battles or a looking at multiple options and having that growth mindset while still defending your personal beliefs.
I was going to say, to go back to the lens analogy we were using earlier, it's like you're going to the glasses store.
Trying on some new glasses.
This is your education. You're researching history. You're trying on other people's glasses. And you're like, ooh, do I like this? Do I like the way it fits? And for me, I always feel like I have to custom build mine. I'm like, all of these are terrible, except for little tiny bits that I'm going to take from each.
Let's
of
break
them.
all of them and then make a mosaic.
Just ruin one glasses store for one pair of glasses. Not to like actually get into the topic, but like my parents, both of them, got like horrible sex ed as kids. Like my dad, his parents bought like an encyclopedia section. Like they just like bought like the childcraft books. I don't know. Apparently those were a thing. And they were like, yep, I don't know. There's probably something in there about it. We're not gonna talk about it. Okay, I'm gonna go to work for like 9 hours and not talk to you. Bye.
That's how I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, and
I
then
don't want
like,
to talk about it.
and then like
same thing
my
happened to
parents
me.
have been pretty good about it, I feel like. But then like there are still areas where I was like, wish we'd covered more. Where it's like, okay, now I know what I want with my kids. I want to like get ahead of this and like be not like, I don't want there to be a shame thing. I don't want there to be like, I don't want it to be taboo in our house. I want to just like, oh, you got a question? Let's do it. Let's talk about whatever. Like you can't ask a question where we're going to be like, Timmy, where did you learn that? Like, what, you know what I mean? Like, sorry, I'm naming my kids after you, Tim.
Sweet.
There's a quote by Maximilien Robespierre that I
Wait,
love.
I've heard of him. What is he?
So he was French Revolution. He killed a bunch of people, but he was very effective. I have to say.
Garrett.
I
It
don't
was
like
Garrett.
what he did because he like
Garrett. What did he
sent
do?
like 10,000 people through the guillotine. He was
Didn't
like
he
one of the
also get
major leaders.
guillotined?
What?
Yes.
Yeah, no, he at the end of the Reign of Terror, he himself was guillotined, if that's
Nice.
the correct.
They said, wait
Anyways,
a minute.
but
He got guillotined.
This son of a
yeah,
gun.
there you go.
He got guillotined.
He's
But
exactly
like
what we
actually
want.
though, he was really effective in what he did, and he, as even from just a kid, as he was growing up, I believe his father was a lawyer. He grew up in a place where he went to a lot of law school. He started super early leading things, and then throughout the whole French Revolution, he was very much a prominent leader, and he was very effective in what he did, regardless of morally whether or not you believe in him. But one thing that he said was the secret of freedom lies in educating people. And I think that definitely goes back to what you're talking about, is if we want to be free, if we want to have free speech, if we want to have free religion, if we want to have free paradigms and the ability to shift our paradigms, to have that growth mindset, we need to educate ourselves. We need to educate our children. We need to educate our peers, our mentors. If people live in ignorance, and I mean, ignorance is bliss, whatever. No, or at least I personally don't believe that. But you need to be educated, and you need to have information to process if you're going to process it.
A takeaway from today is the constant fluidity and continuation of education is the direct challenger to your paradigms.
Is that the third fluid that you couldn't remember earlier? There's
There's-
bile,
Yeah.
blood, and
There's-
education.
well,
And
kind of.
education. I keep that one like in my spleen area.
That's actually what the appendix is
No.
for.
Yeah, it's
it
education.
produces
Oh my God, we
education
figured it
fluid.
out.
Studied the four humors this last year.
No.
No,
Okay.
I did. Anyways.
Okay, sorry.
The challenge for today, for you listeners out there, calm down and look at the lens that you're looking through, and you can decide whether you want to change it or not, or when. But just remember that it will take time.
Yeah, and I just like to say thank you so much to our original hosts, Ava and Dallin. You guys have brought so much to this podcast. You've pioneered it. You've brought it so far, and we are so grateful for the information, for the learning, and for the process that you've gone through for this. We're super duper excited to keep it going and to help it learn and grow. and help it grow even further and progress, and we're super excited. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast today and letting us join you. It has been an amazing experience, and I'm excited to go further.
And thank you guys.
Yeah.
You guys are the ones we wanted to pass the torch to, and we're really excited to hear season 2 and all of your many adventures.
But we're the OGs, so like you always will always
Yeah,
have
watch
it
your
on.
back.
So
Don't
like
screw it up.
watch yourself. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just
Run
kidding.
this podcast.
This
into
is
the
fine.
ground.
All right, so thanks for listening, everyone. Remember to engage your social ideas, and then
Plugs.
to the outro. Plugs, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks so much for listening, everybody. And please don't forget to truly engage in the great conversation of ideas.
If you have any questions or comments or great ideas, you can email us at podcast at Sorry.
Yes! Yes! Oh my gosh! Perfect last episode. You had to mess up.
I had to.
Bring it
If you
back.
have
Full
any,
circle.
if you have any questions, comments, whatever, you can email us at podcast@paradigmhigh.org, or you can follow us on Instagram at the Paradigm Pod. Alrighty, catch you on the flip side.